All right, let's talk about China's electric vehicle revolution. Now, on the surface, it seems like this incredible, unstoppable success story. But when you actually dig in, you find a story that's so much more complicated and honestly, way more interesting.
First, just to get a sense of the scale here, by 2018, China had 2.31 million electric vehicles on its roads. I mean, just let that sink in. That's more than all of Europe and the United States combined. No question about it, they were the undisputed world leader.
So you see a number like that and you think, case closed, right? A total success. But not so fast. Because the real question is, was this massive government project actually working for the everyday people who were supposed to be driving these cars? That's where the story gets tricky. Because just when it seemed like China's EV growth was a rocket ship to the moon, the whole market just hit a wall. It was a slowdown that nobody saw coming, and it sent shockwaves through the entire industry.
Yeah, look at this. After years and years of just insane growth, sales actually went down in 2019. This was the first time that it ever happened. They were forecasting 1.6 million new cars, and they fell way short. So what on earth happened?
Well, the problem was pretty simple, but it was huge. The government's whole plan was based on a two-step process. First, get EVs into commercial fleets, buses, taxis, that sort of thing. Then, individual car buyers were supposed to jump in and carry the momentum. But that second step, it just kind of fizzled out. The handover stalled. But why?
To figure that out, we have to zoom in from those big national statistics and look at the daily reality for actual EV owners. And what we find is that for a lot of them, that reality, well, it was a huge pain.
I mean, that might sound a little extreme, but this quote from a Chinese auto media outlet really captures how fed up some drivers were feeling. We're not talking about a few small annoyances here. For some, the whole experience of owning an EV felt completely broken. And this gets to the absolute core of the problem, range anxiety. So take a look at this high-end luxury EV, the NIO ES8. The brochure promises you can go over 500 kilometers on a single charge. Fantastic. But then you actually take it out on the highway for a real-world test, and you barely get 242, less than half. Can you imagine planning a road trip based on that first number? It's a recipe for getting stranded.
Oh, and it gets so much worse. If you're in northern China during the winter, that cold weather can just demolish your battery's performance. Highway driving, as we saw, drinks power like it's going out of style. And this all adds up to a genuinely terrifying scenario. The average distance between charging stations on a Chinese highway is 200 kilometers. For a lot of standard EVs, trying to make that jump in the real world is a gamble you're probably going to lose.
But okay, let's say your battery does hold up. You manage to limp into a service area. Your problems are far from over, because now you have to find a charger that actually works, and that is a whole other nightmare.
Drivers literally call it the charging station lottery. You pull up and who knows what you'll find. Maybe there's a gasoline car parked in the EV spot, maybe the charger itself is just broken, and it stays broken because running these stations often isn't profitable, so nobody bothers with maintenance. A map might tell you a charger is there, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to charge your car.
So the national picture is looking pretty bleak, right? But this is where the story takes a really cool turn, because instead of just giving up, a couple of cities got incredibly creative and came up with two totally different but equally brilliant solutions.
Let's start in Hangzhou. It's a huge tech hub home to Alibaba, so it kind of makes sense that they tried to solve the EV problem with, well, more technology. They focused on the city's taxi fleet because those drivers can't afford to be sitting around for hours waiting for a charge.
And their solution is just amazing. It's battery swapping. Instead of plugging in, a taxi driver just pulls into one of these stations. An automated system slides out the empty battery, pops in a fully charged one, and they're back on the road. The whole process takes about 3 minutes. 3! That's the same amount of time it takes to fill a tank with gas. For taxi drivers, this was an absolute game changer.
Okay, now for something completely different. The city of Liuzhou didn't try to make EVs behave like gas cars. No, they did something way smarter. They convinced their citizens to completely change how they think about driving.
They did it with these little guys, micro EVs. I mean, they're tiny two-seaters, even smaller than those famous kei cars in Japan. They are not designed for long highway trips. They're designed for one thing and one thing only: getting around a crowded city efficiently.
So how'd they make them so popular? Well, first off, they're super cheap.
But here's the really genius part. They gave micro EV drivers access to the bus lanes, so you could just fly past all the traffic jams. They also built tons of special smaller parking spots with chargers just for these cars. They didn't force anyone to do anything. They just made driving a micro EV the smartest, fastest, and most convenient choice. It's brilliant. And the results? They speak for themselves. By 2018, EVs made up a whopping 5.4% of all cars in Liuzhou. That just crushes the national average, and it's even way ahead of a mega city like Beijing. They proved you could do it by making EVs the better option, not the only option.
So what does this all mean for the rest of us? Well, China's whole journey, with all its massive failures and these incredible local successes, basically provides a roadmap for every other country that's trying to go electric.
When you boil it all down, China's experience really shows us 3 clear paths to success. First, you can start with predictable use cases like city buses or delivery fleets. Second, you can follow the Hangzhou model and use technology like battery swapping to make EVs just as convenient as gas cars. Or third, you can take a page from Liuzhou's book and use clever incentives to get people to change their behavior to match what EVs are already great at.
In the end, the path to an electric future isn't about just one type of car or one type of charger. It's about being smart, being creative, and actually understanding how people live and drive. China has learned these lessons the hard way. The only question now is the rest of the world listening?